Kenya's population has been on a steady rise, and the high population increase has posed major challenges to housing and, yes, transportation and connectivity. And nowhere do these challenges loom larger than in Nairobi, Kenya's capital city. The city of Nairobi, home to 5 million people. Every first day of the year, its population nearly increases by a third, swelling with an army of commuters. These people are essential to the life of the city. But getting all of them to enjoy life in and outside the central business district is a daily adventure that borders on the edge of chaos. Just under Nairobi's tall buildings, more than 100,000 people are traveling to and from the busy central business district by matatus, personal vehicle, and on foot. A good number coming by rail. They all converge at the country's economic hub, the CBD. Here, they connect to jobs, schools, and popular destinations. Getting people to the city is just one hurdle. Now they have to deal with this. It's getting harder and harder to keep all systems running. It is 1 p.m. and it looks like nobody is going anywhere. This is the famous Tomboya Street. A street that draws a picture of a big matatu parking bay. Heavy traffic is common here, irrespective of the time of the day. But this is one of those days when the roads look like car parks.
Kwanza hii barabara ndio traffic yenyewe. Mashimo kutoka huko mpaka pale. Unajua sasa sisi ku experience traffic tumeishi nayo sasa mbaya hili ni kama sasa kitu ya kawaida tu.
We have a huge transit zone for PSVs. We've got PSVs plying Thika Road, parts of Eastlands. On bus station side, we've got Gong, South C, South B vehicles, and they're all parked here. Okay, so it's not a movement zone.
It's only a thin layer of the true picture of insanity that is Nairobi City, a city in dire need of fresh medicine. Things were not always this way in Nairobi. This is a snapshot of how Nairobi used to look like in the late 80s and early 90s, when the city population had just started to swell and systems were in order.
Tulikuwa tunaipraise ikiitwa City Under the Sun ama City Under Sahara. Na ilikuwa safi sana. Ulikuwa huwezi kuona uchafu. Na hata siku hizi tunaita City Under the Dam.
This is how it looks today, busy and vibrant, overcrowded and disorganized. Matatu's madness is the order of the day.
We are a bad city. It's a city that is not good for living in and doing business in because it is unpredictable. Any transport system that is unpredictable on time and tariffs, which is fares, tells you are living in a very bad transport system.
One bridge is up, the other one will be down.
I accompanied President Uhuru Kenyatta during his visit of Belgium last year. Besides bilateral talks with his Belgian counterpart, the head of state was here to benchmark and learn from a country whose infrastructure is her biggest income generator. Transport CS James Macharia was in the delegation, and I asked him if he was still proud of Nairobi looking at the city of Brussels.
I will not be honest if I say that our planning was good. If you remember 1970s, for example, Nairobi was a good place with the population, number of vehicles. In 1970, for example, you go to Uhuru Park, you walk around, you go home for lunch because there's no traffic jam. The job is huge now in terms of reversing what has been done, but it must be done.
Now we know Nairobi's journey to greatness took a wrong turn along the way. Those who have lived in Nairobi long enough tell a story of how the city's grace turned to mortification.
We need to get our city back.
Born in the early 60s, Bruce Odhiambo, a music producer, was raised in Nairobi.
Look at me, look at me. Wow, that's
How long have you been a photographer?
many years.
Yusuf Washira has been a professional photographer in the city from 1974. Washira was born and raised in Nairobi's Kibera slums.
Nation, I worked for 12 and a half years from June 1986 to April 2002.
Through his lenses, Washira has seen Nairobi grow and expand and its greatness diminish.
Oh, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
for coming.
Welcome to NTV.
Sorry, I'm walking with you.
Another man who has seen Nairobi's growth and dwindling beauty through a camera lens is the award-winning photographer Mohinder Dolan. He is the author of the book My Camera, My Life. Mohinder arrived in Nairobi from India as a young boy in 1947 when Kenya was still under colonialism.
Nairobi is ever expanding. I mean, because of my helicopter injuries, I hardly go out. I sometimes haven't been to an area for a year, and I say, where am I?
I am brought up, educated, still living in Nairobi. So Nairobi is home.
When you started out in Nairobi, how was it?
It was very beautiful. Everything was orderly. The lawns, the flowers, the public parks were well maintained. 1 or 2 public toilets, proper. Things like the libraries were well maintained to cater for the people. And so are the primary schools and hospitals and dispensaries. They were fantastic.
Okay. Do you miss the Nairobi that was that time?
I do miss it so much. In fact, some of the things excite me so much whenever I think about them. And when I tell my children, this used to be like this one used to be like that, I think Mzee is telling lies or joking.
In essence, cities are supposed to connect people with each other, to the cities they work or go to school, to places they shop or socialize. This pegged on a reliable transport system. A closer look at the region's business and political hub reveals a city that has failed to leap into the future. Along Tomboya Street, Nairobi is limping. Residents suffocating under the ballooning population and diminishing space. The present state of chaos in Nairobi's public transport system, unpredictability, noise, arrogance, roughness, and general disorder looks normal, especially along the ever-busy Tomboya Street. It's no wonder this is a city perpetually on the move, a case of survival for the fittest as residents compete with vehicles with the space diminishing each passing day. Now this is supposed to be a form of impunity by matatu drivers. But in Nairobi, it's almost normal, even as this bus uses the wrong lane and eventually goes over a pavement. A few minutes later, another matatu driver does the same and seemingly without blinking. It's impunity at its best.
Unajua sasa walisema wanataka mabasi, wanaume wakazibai na ubaya. Sasa kununua na ubaya sasa unaona walisema hizi kidogo ati zinaleta jam. Sasa jam ndio ilikuja ikakuwa wasi.
And as we kept shooting for about 5 minutes, an accident involving a matatu and a private car occurred.
Came and knocked me from the left side, and then actually he did it deliberately. He knocked me and then he proceeded to move himself from there. I've just come from the office and I was in my right lane and I followed, but he kept on encroaching and encroaching and encroaching. He actually did it deliberately.
It's not normal. It is a bad situation. In fact, the most glaring thing that when visitors come to Kenya now look at, despite what we may want to call, is our public transport system. It is bad. However good we make the airport, however good we make our airline look like.
I mean, walking on Tambaya Street is a risk. So today, at this time, it's a risk for your life, I think most of the time, because you have pickpockets. I mean, you're uncertain what will happen. Tomboya Street of them days. You could see the end of the street. Shops that were well organized, shops that were well lit. We did not even have burglar proofing. Burglar proofing came in the 80s. Actually, I think after we had the coup is when now everybody started putting burglar proofing on their shops. Shops used to just be lit with that nice, beautiful window, and you could see the display as you walked. Tomboya Street from end to end was a place you'd want to walk through. If I remember the journeys in our days, because you'd stop and you'd look at every other shop. You know, window shopping, I think that's where window shopping came from. There was so much to see, so much to enjoy, so much space. And we knew if I'm walking this way, we were kind of like wired like vehicles. So you walked towards this side. So there was never this story of Nipishe, Songa, you know, tulikuwa na formula in a way.
Roads aren't free either. If drivers in Nairobi were asked to reflect on the real cost of commuting, then driving in the city's outskirts would not seem so economical.
At the end of the day, look, Brother Enoch, from Otiende to CBD, the amount of time spent there, the amount of fuel, the amount of tear and wear, and the emotional stress the citizens go through, if you quantify that into Kenya shillings, you would cry. That is just one route.
The financial argument against more cars and driving is however overshadowed by the harsh talk of Nairobi's poor transport system that is taking a toll on the residents' health, safety, and comfort. Those who lived through the better days of Nairobi unanimously agree that the moment the city started to lose order in the public transport system, the city began to lose a society. Disorder, disrespect, chaos, corruption took the best of Nairobi people. Take a look at this. Motorcyclists, commonly referred to as border riders, taking a claim of the CBD. Now, this is what happened. In the middle of the road, with arrogance, they stand to get passengers. And this is the busy Kenyatta Avenue, right outside Kimathi House. The head of the Umbrella Workers Union, KOTU, Francis Atwoli, was born and raised in Kenya's capital and understands too well when the rain started beating city dwellers.
Nairobi was like in France, or like in Switzerland, or like in UK. Everything was in order. There were no potholes in Nairobi, and everything was properly arranged, even including the train transport from Nairobi to Kisumu and Mombasa. You could enjoy the train. I was in France recently, from Paris to a small city in eastern of Paris called Poche, and I went by train. I cried because I saw what I used to see when I was a young man. When we are going to Western Kenya after holidays, when we have closed our schools, you see ticket examiner coming, a Kalasinga, or a young, low, smart ticket examiner.
Nairobi was used to be called Green City in the sun. Understand? And there used to be, I think there was a march about, who was the mayor? I can remember, Margaret Kenyatta. You see, that time, it was pride, where the mayor had pride in the city. And there was a march towards the, city hall and things like that, the pride and things like that, which is not there anymore.
You've been a photographer in Nairobi for quite some time. And from your lenses, has Nairobi changed for the better or for the worst?
Things are about different. There were plenty of buses. They were not overcrowded. And they were on time. And there were plenty of them. If you missed one, you didn't have to run after it. There would be another one coming pretty soon. A little bit like another organized country like England or London or somewhere else.
We had even seasonal passes. We had seasonal passes in which you just pay and you have it for the whole month and things like that. And then you just go, the guy looks at it and lets you. He knows it was valid. And KBS was brilliant. We'd go on the bus and things like that.
On time, it is there. Just watch your time. 15 minutes and it was there written. You just watch and you are there exactly. Kenya bus is there in time. 2, it was the cleanest city. It used to be cleaned at night, and also, they could clean using water at night, the city council guys. And it was so clean.
Indeed, being a franchise of the London-based Overseas Transport Company, OTC, the Kenya Bus Service was modelled based on its mother company. They were supported by the train system, affording city residents fairly comfortable transport.
Now, it touched the areas that were high population and connected them.
The death of an organized public transport system for Nairobi began when matatus emerged. The Kenya Bus Service was born in 1966 after the then Nairobi City Council signed with Britain's Overseas Transport Company to establish an exclusive franchise to carry fare-paying passengers in and around Nairobi. It was modelled on a private-public partnership. While the bus company lasted, the city authority played a minimal role in its operations. KBS offered better bus services in terms of scheduled routes and ticketing.
Reliable to a fault. It had, every bus stage used to have the timings that you'd expect the bus. And you had a bus that would actually cross from Kawangware all the way to Isili. You had a bus that came from Kenyatta and would end up in Buruburu. And we had a bus that would go to the airport and go to Langata.
And those routes had specific numbers and specific picking and dropping points, which we used to call them stages. And stage fulani, that's where that word came from. So these are dropping and picking points in each route. So therefore, for example, I'll give you Kibera, where I spent most of my life. From post office, the next spot for the Kibera people was Kenyatta Hospital to pick the sick or to drop the sick from the city center. After that, it is Woodley. After that, it is Kibera itself, and then the main terminus in Kibera. And you reverse the trip just like that.
So there was a very organized transport system, and it was reliable.
Each bus was allocated a schedule in terms of time. And therefore, people in Nairobi were operating on time factor.
But it could not cope with the transport demand that was growing in the city. Entrepreneurs operating matatus and other buses exploited this gap to access the market. According to Yusuf Washira, a veteran photojournalist, matatu owners were also a political force that successfully broke the monopoly of the KBS in 1973 when Kenya's founding president Mzee Jomo Kenyatta legalized matatus without requiring any further regulation.
When the population now outstretched the available transport, the number and the routes, because new estates were sprouting around because of that population growth, what happened is some very creative Kenyans decided, there is room here. So they saw a niche. I can carry people from my route, which are Eastlands, and make some money. And this is where the word matatu came from. Mangotore matatu. Mangotore matatu. Mangotore matatu. He is charging Mangotore matatu 30 cents because the official price of Kenya bus is 50 cents. So for him to grab you and to convince you as a customer that you have a better option here, he would charge you 30 cents. And that was the entry. That was the entry of a new kid in the block.
And then we lost discipline in between somewhere, you see? And then it was everybody on his own.
Although the 1973 presidential decree allowed matatus to operate without license, they still had to comply with existing insurance and traffic regulations. But many operators ignored this, and in the scramble to compete for passengers, the police did little to enforce traffic rules. The symbiotic relationship became entrenched, where the police simply took payoffs from matatu operators and failed to apply the law. The decree opened up the sector to many unregulated and uncoordinated operators, threatened the survival of KBS with its more planned and formal service.
Remember, the Kenya bus had scheduled, designated pick and drop. So what Matatu was doing, he would drop and pick in betweens.
Anywhere?
Yes. So it became anywhere. And then anytime.
So it became convenient to the consumer.
Yes, and that was it. And then the Matatu took advantage of that. That negligence or oversight as a country created that. The rest is history.
This opened them up even further to bribery, as the easiest way to address the possibility of fines was to pay off the police, who were increasingly seen as part of government oppression.
I think greed, poor planning, poor management, that ran down Kenya bus services. Nyayo bus came up. It didn't last long either. Now when the matatus came, yes, they seemed to have been they kind of were supplementing the population growth that Kenya bus was not able to cope with. Because in the beginning, in the 70s, they ran very well hand in hand. But then after that, it's just chaos.
Where I would say we went wrong was not utilizing what we had and raising it to the next level. Okay, and how would we raise this to the next level? We would have simply taken the Kenya bus system we had and transformed it into a mass transit system.
In 1990s, the agitation for multi-party politics started to grow, threatening Kenya's only political party, KANU. And the matatu industry became associated with the opposition. And the industry became a political tool for those who harbored ambitions of rising to the very top politically.
Today, Nairobi is no longer Nairobi, and Nairobi cannot be among the international cities.
And not only that, we've lost value. Nairobi has no courtesy, Kenyans have no courtesy. It went. When we were young, you knew that at a zebra crossing, you looked right and left, and that any driver would just automatically stop for you. Today, look at the zebra crossings. Have you tried to stop by one? First and foremost, pedestrians feel it is their right. 24/7, where lala hapo, you know. And then, on the other side, drivers, we all are in such a hurry to get to where it's very competitive.
Since 2003, the government has been constructing roads, among them overpasses, to cure the congestion menace. But rather than reducing vehicular congestion, the expansion of the road network instead appears to be actually increasing it. This explains why, despite the construction of the modern Thika superhighway, congestion remained the picture along the busy city artery. Nairobi residents are asking for an efficient, safe and reliable transport system. Most residents are of the view that instead of making more room for cars, Nairobi should make more room for pedestrians, cyclists and rapid transport systems.
What we are missing out is a public system of transport. We need a public system of transport. Once you have that efficient public system, then you also enable other mobilities like cycling, you enable walking, so that even some spaces should just be for walking. Most big cities, you would not have vehicles on Kenyatta Avenue or Moi Avenue. Why would you have vehicles on Moi Avenue? See how Moi Avenue can't move. Try to go there in the evening, you can't move because the vehicles are all over, the pedestrians are all over. So we need to start seeing where we can just totally ban vehicles from accessing at all from the city, and then have an efficient public transport that works. Private cars will not help us.
Paris boasts one of the world's safest and most efficient public transportation systems. Trains usually arrive on time. Buses are well appointed and clean, and commuter express RAR trains service the city's most important stops in record time.
Meaning that it takes a shorter time to go by public transport from point A to B as opposed to a car. So taking your car to Paris, driving it in Paris is actually a liability for your general mwananchi.
I met Sheila Chepkoech in the French capital in April last year. I had accompanied President Kenyatta during his visit to France, and Chepkoech was among Kenyans who addressed the diaspora conference on behalf of Kenyans based in France. She was then in her last year at the Paris School of International Affairs, pursuing a master's degree in international development. She told me how Paris transport system suited her schedules as a student.
They make transport very affordable. As long as you're below the age of 26, you can apply for what they call carte Navigo. So this card is, you pay a 1-year subscription fee, and for students it's normally subsidized. And for this card, once you have it, for that 1 year, you can travel basically between what they call Ile-de-France. So Paris, as you can look at, as you know, Paris is divided into 5 districts. With this card, you can travel within the 5 main district, which is a very big distance, and it's unlimited. So, for instance, today I can move from point A to point B to point C without thinking about transport, without worrying about transport, as long as I have this card, which for me as a student is very cost effective and very efficient.
There are lanes for cyclists, and now they have come up with what they call Velib. It's a bicycle that you can come and take from one place, ride to another and leave it there. The same is happening with cars, Autolib, which are electrical. So you can take from point 1 to B, and that is just to ease the traffic congestion. And then they have lanes for buses and taxis that are different from the lanes for the usual cars. So which means that it is all about the traffic being a bit faster for the public.
Speaking of that, have you ever used the bikes, those bikes you pay from this point?
Yeah.
How are they?
Unfortunately, I haven't had the courage to ride a bike, but I'm thinking of it. It's something that I'm considering because it's also good for exercise. And also, I was here during winter, and over winter it's very difficult to drive to ride a bike around the streets. Yeah, but it's something that I consider, and it's much cheaper even with the if you compare it to the train card. You also pay. It's the same principle. You pay an annual subscription fee, or you pay a monthly fee if you want to, and you pick the bike from the different points and you ride it. So for instance, if I want to go to school, there's a bike point close to where I live. I can just pick, using my card, I can pick a bike, ride it to school, I'll get another point, park it there, go for my classes, and then I'll walk to another place and just take a bike and go back home.
Now, world over, we have seen countries embracing alternative modes of transport, especially when you're talking about bikes and pedestrians, creating ways or lanes for pedestrians and bikes. Is that a way that Kenya should look at in the future?
Nobody will go. Man, these people who own half a dozen Mercedes, you think they will let these things happen? It's a non-starter now. One thing I do notice in this country, nationalism is zero. People have no pride in Kenya and in Africa too.
Now, there are several ways of moving around here in the central business district in Nairobi. You can use a boda, especially if you need to maneuver around. You can also use a taxi. But the best or the most used mode of transport is the matatu. And as you can see here, this is a GPO matatu stage, and we are waiting for a matatu to Kilimani. Most of the matatus we are seeing here are not headed to that direction. And remember, I have Sheila Chepkoech, you remember her? From Paris, France. She completed her master's degree program and she's back in the country working in Kilimani. And so she's joining us. Welcome, Sheila.
Asante. I left my house at 6:30. Took a bus to town. It's taken me about 2 hours. I got off at GPO, then connected. Now I'm taking this to work. It took some time to adjust, but now I understand it's part of the city. But it's frustrating because you lose a lot of time, you lose a lot of energy. You know, by sitting in traffic for 2 hours in the morning on your way to work, sort of, it drains you. By the time you get to the office, you just find yourself frustrated. You have people who woke up, as we say here, on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes you find yourself arguing with someone, or you see Kenyans also sleeping in matatus. So I think we spend a lot of time on the road, which is a resource that we could be using, you know, to do something else.
Now that you have lived in Paris for some time, you're back to Nairobi, and you know Nairobi's transport system. What areas do you think needs address?
Can we be able to avoid all matatus coming first to town? You know, I don't have to come all the way to town for me to go to Gong Road if I'm coming from Utawala.
If it was organized, that, you know, you'd have some unity of these groups talking, and just do a sequence transport system. I feel that Thika Road matatus should not be coming to the city, if you ask me. I mean, no public transport should come to the city. You should have a terminal where all these vehicles stop, and then you can have a shuttle system that would charge, for example, 20 bob, that will just be doing, you know, or having a tram system or something. Then that way you decongest the city. That way people leave their vehicles.
Right now the world is talking of hybrid system of transport. A hybrid system plans itself. If you say you are going to have a BRT, a bus rapid transit, you know the corridor it plies. If you are going to have a light rail, you know the corridor it plies. Then you have the feeders. The matatus could be feeding in. And this is a negotiated thing. It was done in South Africa, and it was very tough because you have to negotiate it with all transport providers.
When the county government came into operation in 2013, the newly elected governor of Nairobi, Dr. Evans Kidero, promised to address the city's transport sector, and Kenyans were optimistic. In 2014, his promise of modernizing Nairobi's public transport system appeared to become a reality after he signed a 6.4 billion shillings deal with Chinese automaker Photon to supply 226 buses for a bus rapid transport system. This was phase 1 of the 2,000 buses Photon was expected to deliver in 5 years. The deal collapsed, and Kidero's administration made information about the deal scanty. They reverted to another plan.
To ensure that all the matatus that are congestion, Tom Mboya Street, Moi Avenue, Hakati Avenue, Ronald Ngara Street, Accra Road, and so on and so forth, can move to the outskirts of the city. And then you have another system of bringing people into the city using our loop line that's already being designed by our engineers, and that decongest the city. So there's a plan.
This plan also remained just on paper. Kidero left City Hall after losing in August general election. Nairobi's new governor Mike Sonko appears to have opted for Kidero's second plan, but without a well-structured implementation plan.
It's not practical to have people walking from one end of town to the other. So if we have the city shuttles that are well organized and efficient, because efficiency is also an issue, then that's something that would definitely work.
Cities world over are continuously embracing BRTs. Nairobi can also move for this system, which is fast as it runs in segregated lanes and involves prepaid fare collection and at-level boarding.
We are focusing ourselves first and foremost on the Jogoo Road BRT to ease congestion, to ease traffic, to reduce the cost of living and doing business in Nairobi.
Boarding will be fast because the platform and the bus flow are at the same level and the doors open automatically when the vehicles stop. Other services can be attached to the BRT network to enhance efficiency. Bicycle rides and terminals can be incorporated into the stations and terminals, making it easier for passengers to reach their destinations. Enoch Sikolia, NTV.